Chapter 17. The Cloak and Blanket. When I was 13 years old, my father sent me to Pahoa to learn a trade, tailoring, and to attend Pahoa school. My father knew a Chinese tailor who came from the same province in China. He had a small tailoring shop. This is where I lived and worked after school. The little town of Pahoa prospered after the lumber mill was built. The mill took care of all the ohia timber to be cut for house building and for railroad ties. It was big business with the ties that were shipped to the mainland. The ohia timber was about 15 to 20 feet wide and 75 feet long. Sometimes it took 3 flat cars to haul one log cut into 3 pieces. The engine pulled about 10 flat cars at one time. The timber was about 6 miles from Pahoa. The Koreans did the cutting and hauling of the timber onto the flat cars by means of a steam hoisting engine with a block and tackle. I had the pleasure of riding on the locomotive that pulled the empty flat cars to the place where the timber was cut. When the loading was finished, the flat cars were pulled back to the mill. I attended school every day. After school, I had to do some sewing on at least one pair of denim or khaki pants. It took at least 2 hours to finish one pair of pants. On Saturday, I usually finished about 2 or 3 pairs of pants. On Sunday, I attended church, and after church, I spent my time with my grandparents living at Old Pahoa. While attending school, some of the children began to tell each other what they had heard their parents tell them. One of the boys, a good friend of mine, told me what his father said to his mother. Being the oldest boy, he listened and questioned his father, but it was still a mystery to him. He said that one morning, the workers got on the cane cars and the train traveled near Maku'u Junction. This is where the train either headed for Hilo or Kapoho. The boy's father was in charge of the cane cutting that morning. As they arrived at their place of work, they went to the place where they had left off cutting the day before and started cutting. The train pulled onto the side track and left the empty cane cars. Then it moved on to pick up the loaded cane cars to take them to Ola'a Sugar Company by the way of Hilo. It was about 10 o'clock. The sun was shining bright and the trade winds were blowing nicely through the upper forest. In the upper forest, the ohia trees were scattered over the lava rock. There were places where the grass looked yellow, and where there was lava rock, the grass looked black. His father saw something like a yellow and red cloak and blanket, as if someone was drying them on the lava rock. Of course, he did not bother anyone because the men were busy with their work. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun went in back of the ohia forest. As soon as that happened, the cloak and blanket were gone. He could not see any moving object. For that whole week, he saw the same thing on the lava rock, so he made up his mind to walk up to the place where he saw the cloak and blanket. It was Saturday at about 10 o'clock when both the father and son walked about 5 miles to the place where the father had been working to see if the object was still there. When they reached the place and looked up, they saw nothing, so he made up his mind to walk up to the place. The boy agreed, and they began to walk. It was a long journey and seemed about 10 miles sloping upwards. There were places where the grass was tall, but they did not have a hard time going through them. The only thing was that the grass was sharp like razor blades and full of yellow jackets, but they did not get stung. They arrived at the spot, and the father looked down to where he had been working, and it was the exact spot. They saw no sign of a cloak and blanket, but walked around for about 2 hours, figuring that there might be a hidden cave near the spot. They scanned the rocks to see if any had been moved, but there was not a sign to be seen. It was kind of an eerie feeling for them. The father said, "Yesterday, I saw the object myself laying all over this lava rock, which I believed was for drying purposes. For one man to do this work takes time." So the father said they would try once more and examined the grass to see if it showed markings that someone had been there. They could not find any clue. The father then came to the conclusion that it must be a spirit that did all the drying of the cloak and blanket. It was about 4 o'clock when they left the place. This time, the father decided that they would take the shortcut home. It was lucky that the boy, being a scout, had a small compass. As they were walking back home through the forested area, once in a while, the boy pulled his compass out of his pocket to see if they were on the right track. The compass showed they were on the wrong track, heading east instead of west, so they made a change of direction. The sun was about to set when they arrived on the main road. A pickup truck came by, and the father asked where they were. The driver said if they were headed for Pahoa, they were about 5 miles out, going to Kapoho. In other words, they both had gotten lost. When they arrived home, the family was worried. They thanked the driver of the pickup truck for bringing them home. There were several people living in the vicinity of Pahoa who told the same story. Someone said, "Maybe it is a mirage. There is someone there that takes care of the king's belongings." There were a few Hawaiians who lived at Pahoa who were about 65 years old. I knew one of them whom we thought was a kahuna because he wore a red neckerchief. That made about 5, counting my grandfather, just regular hard-working fathers. The people who saw the strange sight were not Hawaiians. They were mostly Japanese because they did the planting and cutting of cane. Also, a few Filipinos and Chinese saw the drying of the cloak and blanket image during the day. One weekend, I asked to be excused from work from the tailoring shop so I could go to my grandparents at Old Pahoa. The tailor said I could go, but to be back Monday morning for school. I left school at 2:30 o'clock on Friday and arrived at Old Pahoa about 3 o'clock. My grandfather was preparing to leave for the beach. I asked him if I could go with him. He said he wouldn't be back until the next week, so I did not ask any further. While I was there with my grandmother, I spoke to her about the cloak and blanket that the Japanese had been talking about. They were sure that there must be dead people or spirits doing this to attract people's attention. When they left the place, they always got lost, just like my schoolmate. My grandmother listened carefully, but did not say a word. My grandfather always went to the beach and stayed there a week or so. Sometimes when he came home, he had nothing and only talked about the weather and brought home only beach crabs or seaweed. Sometimes I told my grandmother that he never went to the beach, and she asked me how I knew this. I said it was because he did not take anything to go fishing with, and said he must be the one that took the cloak and blanket to dry that the Japanese had seen and wanted to steal from him. My grandmother looked at me and said I was too young to notice these things. Then I came out and told her it was the Chinese in me. If I was full Hawaiian, I would not say a word. Still, my grandmother would not tell me. She just laughed and said when my grandfather came home, I should tell him, and maybe he would have the answer. The reason I asked was because the people always said the Hawaiians are always hiding the good things they have and would not show them to anyone. If they showed them, they would know that the Hawaiians had something worthwhile to see. It is better to show it than to hide it. Maybe I am wrong. I said that maybe it is only a mirage that they saw. My grandmother asked me what I thought a mirage was, and I told her it is something that is real when you are far away, but when you come near, it disappears. The next time, I came over just for a day. My grandfather asked me what I had heard about seeing the cloak and blanket, and I told him all that I had heard about it. He listened and did not say a word. I waited for an answer. He looked at me and said, "You think I took care of the cloak and blanket. Also, you think I did not go to the beach to fish. I spent all the time at the beach, but it was rough, so there was nothing I could do. When you asked me to take you, you had to go to school. You must wait until you have your vacation." Then with a smile, he began to tell me about the mysterious mirage. What the people see is correct. This is the work of the menehune, who take care of the king's belongings. These little people do this work day and night. The only reason you see it in the daylight is because the cloak and blanket must be dried. When people see it, they are lucky. Some won't see it. Take, for instance, me, your grandfather, cannot see the menehunes. They see me, but I cannot see them. I can hear them talking, and that is all. The one supposedly doing this work is your great-grandfather Kepa, who lives at Waiohinu, Ka'u. He is the last keeper picked by the family tradition to protect the property of the kings. The menehunes are his helpers. As you know, since there are no kings to take care of, he relinquished his right to the menehunes. You must know now that your mother was picked to bear the son to do that work. Instead, you had a sister before you. According to the ritual, the girl had to go, leaving you to carry on. But because you are only part Hawaiian, this will never happen. It is the wish of your great-grandfather to cut you out and leave everything to the menehunes. As my grandfather told me, what I have said to you must be kept secret. Of course, you are free from any obligation, but it is a very dangerous thing if you try to look and believe what you find. I warn you, just leave these things alone because you don't understand, and if you don't, you will pay with your life. I said, I understand now what it is all about, and will try to forget, as it is no use getting involved. All I am interested in is to write what I have learned, as long as I don't try to disturb the belongings or relics that I see, or to divulge to others the places for monetary value. After my grandfather listened to what I said, he agreed with me.